Hello, working a bit more on my watch today. This is the Sapphire Mineral glass. It's a 21mm glass, which would have been used for a lady's round watch. Square watches always come up much larger on the wrist than round watches. This is going to be a square watch with a round glass, which is quite unusual. I'm not really sure how it's going to look till it's done. You can sketch out and plan these things, but until you see them in the flesh, really hard to know aesthetically how big or small it wears on the wrist. And I've just got a bit of silver wire in my hands, which I'm bending round roughly to the shape of the glass. I'm going to cut this open and solder it. I lost a little bit of my video today. I have an old camcorder, digital camcorder, which I'm using to record this with. These days we use our mobile phones, but I need my hands free to work, and the camcorder is easier because I can just set it up and work in front of it. Occasionally it corrupts for some reason, and so I lost a bit where I was measuring up and cutting a hole in the gold. Lots of checking the right angles and making sure it's perfectly square. Cutting a circle out of it smaller than it needs to be, and then filing it to the line. And a lot of this stuff is a case of checking everything multiple times. You want everything as accurate as possible, but you also have to know when to stop, because it's a temptation to try and get things so perfect that you work on them too long, take away too much material. This is hard solder in my hands. I always hammer the solder so it's thin. I haven't got rolling mills, so I can't just squeeze it thin, but you want thin little squares like that. I'll just put that on a charcoal block. This ring of silver wire is going to be held in tweezers. This is flux in this green bottle. I always used to use borax and a dish, which you mix a paste with. You put a bit of water in the dish and grind the borax down. I think it's the traditional thing that jewellers use, and this is ready mixed flux, which is on there. You can pick up the solder with the wet tip of the paintbrush. You can also drop it that way. So I picked it up with tweezers and I've put it back on the piece. One disadvantage of borax is when you first heat it up, it tends to fizzle, and sometimes it spits the solder off the surface. A lot of people drop the solder on when it's already hot. There's multiple ways of doing these things. This flux seems better that it doesn't spit in that way, but it's less traditional to have it ready mixed. I'm probably going to use up this bottle and return to borax. Flux is required to stop the solder oxidising. It won't form a bond if it oxidises. And here I'm heating it up. The solder's already run, but this hard solder doesn't seem to turn very liquidy. It just goes into a blob, and the solder likes to run towards the heat, so I'm just trying to get it to run into the join, and I'm satisfied that it has now. Need to fill up a little pot with water to drop hot things in. Wire cools down quite thick quite quickly, but if you had anything with some mass to it, you need to drop it in some water to get rid of the heat. Just inspecting that, it's joined up okay, and now just gonna clean it up a little bit, tap it round. This is triplet, used for ring sizing generally. And I'm going to grab a mallet, I think, a soft mallet like that. This is actually a carpenter's mallet, but it's soft and it won't dent the metal. So I'm using that to tap this round. And then we'll marry it up to the sapphire mineral glass. Now I'm going to do this procedure in 18 karat white gold. This is just a run through with silver wire. I can take measurements of the silver wire. It might actually prove useful in some other way. I mean, that's the first solder joint I've done in silver for about 8 years. I'm going to clean that up with the file. I used more solder than I needed. Obviously there's a balance. If you use too little solder, the joint's going to be visible, and if you use too much, you're going to have to clean up and get rid of the excess. Put it on a flat iron, block of wood on top, and tap that. We'll get it nice and flat. And then have a look if it's the right size. It still needs a little bit more, so now I'm going to use a little hammer, like a putty hammer, and just tap it round. That spreads out the material a bit. There we go, perfectly around the edge of the glass. Now what I'm showing you is annealing the material. Once you've tapped and hammered silver, all the molecules kind of lock together in a way. It becomes harder than normal, and it has less flexibility, and sometimes it has tension stored in the material. So you need to heat it up until it's glowing red and drop it in some water, and that's called annealing it. All the molecules jiggle around and reset themselves so it's pliable again. And the reason I've done that is if I soldered this again and got it hot enough for the solder to run, it would ping open, whereas now it should stay as is. And that is a little silver ring to go around the glass. So the next thing that I'm going to show you is the 18 karat. I'm going to make that square and cut an opening into it. You can see that this fits the glass perfectly. This is my piece of 18 karat. I scribed a line in it using my dividers, and I just need to cut the end off of it. Now, here is not exactly ideal to work, but I've found a stool a reasonable height, and I've put what used to be the cover for an old record player. I've got that on my knees. That can catch the gold dust. Now with my saw, I'm just trying to put a nick in it so I can get the saw blade started, and then we're going to cut the end off. It's only a couple of millimeters worth of material. You could also, the material is quite thin, you could maybe cut it with snips, but I don't want to bend this at all, and I want an accurate cut, so I'm just going to take it off with the saw blade and then file it back flat along that line. Probably the hardest thing to do as a jeweler is to file flat. The other skills come pretty easily. Along a line is not too bad, but if you have a quite a thick square of material and you want it to be perfectly flat in all directions, that's one skill that takes a little while to come. And I can't quite get comfortable here. With the thing in my lap, I haven't got the ability to do too long a downstroke. I can't really move around, get comfortable. I've got a heavy jacket on, which I need to adjust. Once we start, we're getting through the material fairly well. My hands aren't as strong as they used to be. I used to do this all day, every day, and could hold material without my hands getting tired or hurting. But I'm sure it will come back. And there we're just almost getting through the end of it. And a little bit more to go. I don't want this piece of gold to fly off. It's only a sliver, but it's still worth money. So I've got a little pot that I'm going to put all the bits in. They can be melted down again later, used for something else. And I've made a little scoop from a Coke can, which I can use to collect up all the lemel. Anyway, that's enough for today, and we'll continue in part 3 when I get around to it. Thanks for watching.